she turns her ear to the underworld. She hears the cries of her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. And Inanna hears that her husband has died, and Inanna chooses, Queen of Heaven, chooses to go down into the underworld to witness the death rites of Ereshkigal's husband. We don't know anything more than that. That's all we know as the starting point. And Inanna knows that to go down into the underworld is to go down into the land of no return. When you go into the underworld, you don't get to come back out from the underworld. But she chooses to descend anyway. And she dresses herself in her beautiful royal garments. So she has her crown on, she has her lapis lazuli earrings and her double-stranded bead necklace. She has her breastplate on, known as Come Man Come. And she has her gold bracelet. She has her red Lady Royal garment, and she goes to the underworld. And when she arrives at the gates of the underworld, the gatekeeper Neti is there to meet her. And he runs to Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, and he says, Inanna is here. She wants to see you. And Ereshkigal is enraged. And so she says, lock the gates to the underworld. Inanna is not to enter unless she is stripped bare and bowed low. So Neti goes back and locks the gates to the underworld. And then he says to Inanna, if you wish to come into the underworld, we have 7 gates to traverse. And so they're at the first gate, and Neti says, you must hand over your crown. And Inanna says, but why? And he says, Inanna, do not question the ways of the underworld, for the underworld is perfect. So she surrenders her crown at the 7th gate, losing her connection to her divinity and her heavenly realms. They continue on, descending to the next gate. And as they approach the next gate, Neti says, Inanna, surrender your lapis lazuli earrings. And she says, but why? And he says, Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect. Do not question the underworld. And so she hands over her lapis lazuli earrings. And then they continue along to the next gate. And Neti says to Inanna, now you must hand over your double-stranded bead necklace. And Inanna says, but why? He says, Inanna, do not question the ways of the underworld, for the underworld is perfect. So she hands over her double-stranded beaded necklace. And they continue on to the next gate, the gate of compassion, relating to the heart chakra. And he says, Inanna, hand over your breastplate. And she says, but why, Neti? And he says, Inanna, do not ask questions. The way of the underworld is perfect. So she hands over her breastplate. And they continue on to the next gate, the 5th gate, the gate of personal power. And he says, Inanna, hand over your gold bracelet. And she says, why? And Neti says, because the ways of the underworld are perfect and you should not question them, Inanna. And they continue on to the 6th gate. And at the 6th gate, Neti says, Inanna, you must hand over your anklets, which represent her self-value. So she hands them over, and again asking why. And Neti says, Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect. Do not question them. And they continue on to the 7th gate. And at the 7th gate, she's asked to hand over her red royal lady garment. And so Inanna is now stripped naked. And at the 8th gate, known as the death gate, Inanna is demanded to come down onto all fours and to crawl into the underworld. And when she crawls into the underworld, Inanna, Queen of Heaven, stripped naked, bowed low. Her sister Ereshkigal sits there with the Anunnaki. Ereshkigal casts the wrath through her words upon Inanna, and she casts the evil eye upon Inanna, and then with one foul blow, Inanna is dead, and Ereshkigal, her sister, takes her and hangs her on the meat hooks on the wall. And so this is the descent from heaven down into the underworld for Inanna. Now before Inanna left heaven, she spoke with her assistant Ninshkaba. And Ninshkaba is like her loyal servant. And she said to Ninshkaba, she said, if in 3 days I don't return, lament for me and go to my godfather Enki and ask him to help me. So it's been over 3 days now, and Ninshkaba has started to lament for Inanna, and she goes to Enki and she says, please help Inanna. She hasn't returned. She went down to the underworld. I've spoken with Enlil, her other godfather, who said, no, sorry, I refuse to help. Inanna should have known better. Everyone knows that if you go into the underworld, there's no coming out. That's the rules of the underworld, and they're to be respected. But when she went to her godfather Enki, he had compassion for Inanna, and so he said, okay, I will send down 2 androgynous flies and to sprinkle the water of life and the food of life up on Inanna's corpsed body. And so down go the flies into the underworld, and Enki instructs them, when you hear the labour pain cries of Ereshkigal grieving her husband, mimic her. Make the same sounds as Ereshkigal, mimic her pain. And so this is what the flies do. They come in, they're non-threatening, and they just mimic Ereshkigal's pain and grief at the loss of her husband. And after a while, Ereshkigal starts to feel better, and she looks up at the flies and she says, thank you so much. You've eased my suffering. You know, what can I give you in return? And she said, I'll give you anything that you want. And they just indicated, we want the corpse, we want the meat hanging on the hooks. And so Ereshkigal says, oh, that corpse? Well, you can have that. And so she gives the body of Inanna to the flies, and then the flies do the 60 sprinkles of life on Inanna's body. Hello, come on in. And they sprinkle the water of life on Inanna's body. And Inanna rises. She rises from the dead. She has her own resurrection. But Inanna does not look like anything she did when she left heaven. She's ghastly. She's ghastly. She has surrendered her whole identity and been hung on meat hooks. And now, as Inanna rises, she walks through the 7 gates once again as she leaves the underworld with a posse of ghastly creatures around her, for they are to have someone replace Inanna. And at first, the ghastly posse tried to take Ninshkaba, and Inanna says, no, you cannot take her. She has been my loyal servant. So they continue on. And when Inanna gets home, she finds her husband, Dumuzi, not lamenting, but sitting in his royal garments in the throne as if nothing has happened. So she said, okay, take him. Take him to the underworld. So they take him away. There's another branch off that story about his sister then going to appeal that, and Dumuzi and his sister share time in the underworld so that he doesn't have to be there forever. A little bit like the Persephone and Demeter story relating to seasons, but we won't go too far down that track. Basically the point is Inanna has sent Dumuzi to the underworld, and Inanna has now become queen of heaven and Queen of Earth. And so at each one of those gates, as she left the underworld, she reclaims each of her heavenly garments. Okay, so now that we know the myth of Inanna, we're going to overlay that with the Venus synodic cycle, which simply means the planet Venus in the sky orbit around the sun. So if we look at these tools here and consider this one to be Earth, this is the sun, and here is Venus. She orbits between Earth and sun. And we consider in astrology for her orbit to begin at the inferior conjunct, which simply means she is situated between Earth and Sun. This is when she's having her retrograde period. And as she comes out from that retrograde period and she starts to move around her orbit in the Sun, it takes 7 to 8 Moon-Venus conjuncts until she comes around into the back of the sun's rays, or what we call into the underworld if we overlay the myth of Inanna on it. So when Inanna is in the underworld meeting with her sister Ereshkigal, and she has cast the eyes of death upon her and hung on a meat hook, this is representative in the Venus cycle when we can't see her in the sky anymore. She's transitioning from a morning star, coming around the back of the sun, not visible in the sky anymore, and when she comes back out, she's birthed as the evening star. And it takes her another 7 to 8 Venus-Moon conjuncts until she comes back to the end of the cycle or beginning of the cycle at the Venus retrograde. So this is known as the interior conjunct, the beginning of the cycle. This is known as the superior conjunct when Venus is around the back of the sun. So from Earth's perspective, we can't see Venus anymore. As I said earlier, this represents Inanna going through the death process, which is why I'm dressed as death, because at this point in her cycle, as we speak today, Venus is around the back of the sun and she is getting ready. In the next week, week and a half, we can expect to see her birth as the evening star. We say that when Venus is a morning star, she's more immature in her ways. In fact, many ancient civilizations referred to her as the war god, as the morning star. And when she goes through this death process, she comes out as the evening star, which represents her coming into her maturity and a remembering. Now, in addition to that, each month you can see Venus conjunct with the moon. So the moon spinning around the Earth, and as Venus comes out from the underworld around the 20th of September this year, we will see Venus on the west horizon. So you can go out and start looking for that every night and see when she appears. So watch the sunset, and then just after sunset you should be able to start seeing beautiful diamond in the sky. She will be faint at first and she'll get higher each night and brighter each night. And as she comes around by the 30th of September, from Earth's perspective, we will have the Moon-Venus conjunct. So this happens when it's the waxing crescent moon, so just after the new moon, you'll be able to see a slither in the sky with the planet Venus. It's a really pretty sight on the western horizon, and this marks the first stargate, Venus-Moon stargate, and it relates to Inanna reclaiming her red lady garment. So it's about the base chakra, and that whole following month you can focus on themes around your base chakra, such as safety, security issues. Okay, and then as Venus continues traveling in her orbit around the sun, Moon travels around Earth, and then we have the next Venus-Moon conjunct from Earth's perspective. And what this represents is the second chakra, so reclaiming our creativity. And so the third month she'll be reclaiming third chakra concerns such as personal power. The fourth month she'll be coming into her wisdom around the heart chakra with forgiveness and compassion. The 5th month, Venus Moon conjunct, Western Horizon, throat chakra, reclaiming the way that she communicates with a maturing around that. Then we have the 6th month relating to her reclaiming her lapis lazuli earrings, so she gets a clearer perception, a more mature perception. And then the 7th month, her crown chakra is restored, which represents her connection to the divine. And then she comes back in for her interior or inferior conjunct, where she will go retrograde for 40 days. She'll disappear for about 7 to 10 days, and then she will rebirth as the morning star. So that is how Venus moves around the sun, relating to the moon conjuncts from Earth's perspective. And so we are now just coming out of a 72-day cycle with her moving around the back of the sun. This can go anywhere from 60 to 90 days, but in this particular cycle, it's been for 72 days. So she's just about here. When she's 10 degrees past the sun's rays, or 10 degrees past the sun, I should say, we can see her come out of the sun's rays. Again, it depends where on the planet you're living. You might see it sooner, it might be a little bit later for some areas on the planet. So go out and watch the sky. 17th to the 20th of September would be my estimate for when we'll start to see her again. 30th of September will be the first Venus Moon conjunct. And you can follow along in our vlogs. We'll be doing more stories on the Venus Moon conjuncts as they approach. And we'll also talk more about Venus as the morning star and her moon conjuncts when we come to that part of the cycle again. But for now, I wanted to bring it to your awareness. It's a 584-day cycle, and we've just gone past the halfway mark. But it's the beginning of her birth as the evening star, and it's an opportunity for us to connect in with our love, our self-worth, self-esteem, self-value, how we relate to others, and what our value system is, and how we're using our resources. So we are inviting a maturity to come in with that, because she's the evening star, and she will rise and reclaim herself each month through each chakra system. So that's a pretty exciting thing to go and watch in the sky and connect in with her cycle in that way.